What the hell is going on here? Every word dripped with fury as Harrison Blake's voice shattered the 3 a.m. silence. There on the cold, nursery floor lay his black nanny with his 8-month-old son curled against her chest. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair had fallen loose, and she looked up at him with eyes that held both defiance and terror. "I can explain," she whispered, but Harrison's rage was already building. Some might call it unprofessional. Others might question her methods. But what happened next would transform a broken man's understanding of sacrifice, reveal the true meaning of motherhood, and prove that sometimes the most unlikely people become exactly the family you never knew you needed. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m. in the cramped Inglewood apartment, its red digits cutting through the November darkness like angry eyes. Callie Thompson's hand shot out from beneath her faded blue comforter, silencing the noise before it could wake Mrs. Patterson next door. The 28-year-old woman sat up slowly, her dark skin catching the streetlight filtering through thin curtains, and stretched her arms above her head with a quiet sigh. "Another day, baby girl," she whispered to the photograph on her nightstand, a picture of herself at 16, holding a chubby-cheeked infant with the same warm brown eyes. The frame was worn from years of handling, the edges softened by countless touches during difficult moments. Callie's feet hit the cold linoleum floor of her studio, and she padded to the tiny kitchenette. The space barely fit a person, but she learned to move efficiently through the narrow walkway between her bed and the counter. Coffee first, always coffee first. As the ancient machine gurgled to life, she pulled her shoulder-length hair into a neat bun and began her morning routine. The red scrubs she'd laid out the night before were pressed and ready. Callie had learned long ago that presentation mattered when you worked in Beverly Hills. The wealthy families expected their help to look professional, even if they were caring for babies who couldn't tell the difference between designer clothes and thrift store finds. Morning News with Stephanie Chun, coming to you live from KTLA on this Tuesday, November 15th, the television announced as Callie pulled on her uniform. She glanced at the screen while lacing up her white sneakers. Something about traffic on the 405, a celebrity wedding, and rising gas prices. The usual rotation of stories that felt a world away from her reality. Her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Denise. "Girl, you still working for that tech guy? How's the baby?" Callie smiled as she typed back. "Noah's doing good. Growing like a weed. Boss is complicated. Rich people always are. Stay strong, cuz." The drive from Inglewood to Beverly Hills took 45 minutes on a good day, but Callie had perfected the route to avoid the worst traffic. Her 2018 Honda Civic might not fit in with the Teslas and Mercedes lining the streets of her destination, but it was reliable. She bought it used with her savings from 3 years of nanny work, and every payment felt like a small victory. As she turned onto Sunset Boulevard, the landscape shifted dramatically. The modest apartments and strip malls gave way to towering palm trees and gates that cost more than most people's cars. Callie had made this transition hundreds of times, but something about crossing from her world into theirs still made her shoulders tense slightly. The Blake estate sat behind imposing iron gates on a hill overlooking the city. Security cameras tracked her movement as she pressed the intercom button, and the familiar voice of Harrison's assistant crackled through. "Good morning, Callie." He's already in the office. The gates swung open with mechanical precision, revealing a winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges. The house itself was a testament to modern architecture. All clean lines, massive windows, and materials that probably cost more per square foot than Callie made in a month. But she'd stopped being intimidated by the opulence months ago. Now she just saw it as the place where baby Noah lived. She parked in the staff area behind the main house and gathered her things. A small bag with extra clothes, her nursing textbooks for studying during Noah's naps, and a worn paperback novel she'd been reading in stolen moments. The November morning air carried the scent of jasmine and money, two things that seemed permanently intertwined in this neighborhood. "Morning, Callie," called Carlos, the groundskeeper, as he trimmed roses near the entrance. "Little man's been asking for you." "Babies don't ask for anything at 8 months, Carlos," she laughed, but her heart warmed at the thought. Noah had indeed become attached to her over the past 6 months, and she'd grown just as attached to him. The inside of the house always took her breath away, not because of its beauty, but because of its coldness. Everything was white or gray or some shade of expensive neutrality. The artwork on the walls cost more than most people's houses, but none of it suggested that a child lived here. Only the baby-proof corners and carefully placed toys gave any hint of Noah's presence. She found a housekeeper, Maria, in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Buenos dias, Callie." Mr. Blake left early for meetings, but he said to tell you Noah had a rough night. Didn't sleep well. Callie frowned. Did he say why? Growth spurt, maybe? Or teething? You know how babies are. But Callie didn't know how babies were, and she also knew Noah's patterns better than anyone. The 8-month-old had been her charge since he was 10 weeks old, and she'd memorized every one of his sounds, expressions, and needs. If he'd had a rough night, there was usually a reason. She climbed the curved staircase to the 2nd floor, her footsteps muffled by thick carpet that probably cost more than her car. Noah's nursery was at the end of the hall, a room that managed to be both luxurious and somehow sterile. The walls were painted in soft gray with white trim, and expensive furniture filled the space. A crib that converted to a toddler bed, a changing table with hidden storage, and a rocking chair that had never been used. "Hey there, sweet boy," Callie called softly as she entered the room. Noah was standing in his crib, gripping the rails with chubby fists. His face lit up when he saw her, and he bounced excitedly, babbling in the language only babies understand. His dark hair stuck up in every direction, and his pajamas were twisted from a night of restless sleep. "Rough night, huh?" she murmured, lifting him from the crib. He immediately settled against her chest, his tiny body relaxing in a way that made her heart ache with tenderness. "Let's get you changed and fed, and then we'll figure out what's bothering you." The morning routine was familiar and comforting. Diaper change, breakfast of mashed bananas and oatmeal, most of which ended up on Noah's face and bib, and then playtime on the soft rug in the center of the nursery. Callie sang to him as they played old gospel songs her grandmother had taught her, lullabies she remembered from caring for her sister, and silly made-up tunes that made Noah giggle. But even during their happiest moments, she could see the tiredness in his eyes. He was more clingy than usual, wanted to be held constantly, and when she tried to put him down for his morning nap, he fussed and reached for her. "What's wrong, baby?" she whispered, settling into the rocking chair with him. "Tell Callie what's bothering you." As if he understood, Noah tucked his head under her chin and made soft, contented sounds. His breathing gradually deepened, and she thought he might finally sleep. But the moment she tried to transfer him to his crib, his eyes flew open and he began to cry. This pattern continued throughout the day. Noah would only sleep when he was touching her on her chest, in her arms, or curled against her side during tummy time. The moment she tried to give him space, he became distressed. Meanwhile, across the city in downtown Los Angeles, Harrison Blake stood before a wall of windows in his corner office on the 40th floor of a gleaming tower. At 35, he commanded a tech empire worth billions, but the view of the city sprawling below him felt empty today. His company had just acquired another startup, adding to his portfolio of successful investments, but the victory felt hollow. His phone buzzed with updates from his assistant. Board meeting moved to 3 p.m. Dinner with investors at Spago at 7. Maria called. Noah's fine, but Callie says he's been fussy. Harrison stared at the message about his son, feeling the familiar pang of guilt that had become his constant companion since Noah's birth. 8 months ago, his world had collapsed when his wife Elena died from complications during childbirth. One moment he was preparing to become a father, and the next he was a widower holding a baby he didn't know how to love. The rational part of his mind knew he should be more involved in Noah's daily care, but every time he looked at his son, he saw Elena's eyes staring back at him. The baby was a living reminder of what he'd lost, and Harrison had found it easier to hire the best nannies money could buy than to face his own grief. Callie Thompson had been the 4th nanny he'd hired. The first 3 had quit within weeks, claiming Noah was difficult or demanding. But Callie had stayed, and gradually Noah had flourished under her care. Harrison told himself it was simply because she was more qualified than the others. But he'd noticed the way his son's face lit up when she walked into a room. "Mr. Blake?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 2 o'clock is here. Send them in," he replied, pushing thoughts of home from his mind. Business was easier to understand than babies. Profit margins made sense in ways that lullabies and bedtime stories did not. The rest of his day blurred together in a series of meetings, conference calls, and decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. By the time he looked up from his desk, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded him of Elena's favorite sunset photos. His dinner with investors ran later than expected. The restaurant was the kind of place where the waiters knew your preferences before you sat down, and the wine list read like an investment portfolio. Harrison played his part perfectly. The brilliant tech mogul, the visionary leader, the man who turned ideas into empires. But underneath the performance, his mind kept drifting to the message about Noah being fussy. It was nearly midnight when his driver pulled through the gates of his Beverly Hills home. The house was dark except for a few security lights and the soft glow coming from the upstairs windows. Harrison loosened his tie as he walked through the front door, his footsteps echoing in the empty foyer. The silence felt oppressive after the noise of the restaurant. This house, which architectural magazines had called a masterpiece of modern design, felt more like a museum than a home. Elena had loved it, had spent months planning every detail before Noah was born. Now it just felt like an expensive tomb for his memories. He climbed the stairs slowly, intending to check his emails one more time before bed. But as he reached the second floor, he heard something that made him pause, a soft sound coming from Noah's nursery. Not crying, exactly, but something that suggested his son was still awake. Harrison frowned and checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Noah should have been asleep hours ago. He walked down the hall, his concern growing with each step. If the baby was sick, if something was wrong, he pushed open the nursery door and stopped short, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Callie was lying on the floor beside Noah's crib, flat on her back against the cold marble. The baby was curled up on her chest, both of them breathing in the slow, synchronized rhythm of sleep. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair had come loose from its bun, and one arm was curved protectively around Noah's small body. For a moment, Harrison just stared, his emotions cycling through confusion, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name. This was not what he paid her for. This was not professional. This was, what the hell is going on here? His voice cut through the peaceful silence like a blade, harsh and accusatory. Callie's eyes flew open, and Noah startled awake with a sharp cry. She sat up quickly, trying to shield the baby from Harrison's anger while her mind scrambled for an explanation. "Mr. Blake, I can explain." "I certainly hope so," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Because what I'm seeing looks like my employee sleeping on the job with my son on the floor, like some kind of—" He stopped himself before he said something he couldn't take back, but the words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Callie's cheeks burn with shame and fury. Noah's cries pierced the air like broken glass, his small body trembling as he reached desperately for Callie. She instinctively pulled him closer, her protective instincts overriding every other concern as Harrison's words echoed in the nursery. "Mr. Blake, please lower your voice," Callie said firmly, standing up slowly with Noah clutched against her chest. "You're scaring him." Harrison's jaw clenched as he watched his son's face turn red with distress. The baby's cries grew louder, more frantic, and Callie began swaying gently from side to side. Almost immediately, Noah's sobs began to quiet, though his tiny fists still gripped her uniform. "Don't tell me how to speak in my own house," Harrison snapped, but he did lower his voice slightly. "I want an explanation. Now, why were you sleeping on the floor with my son?" Callie felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she forced herself to meet his cold stare. She had done nothing wrong, and she would not be made to feel ashamed for caring about this child. "Noah has been fussy all day," she began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. He wouldn't sleep unless he was being held. I tried putting him in his crib dozens of times, but he would start crying the moment I set him down. So, your solution was to sleep on the floor? Harrison's tone dripped with disbelief. There's a perfectly good chair right there. There are proper ways to handle a fussy baby that don't involve lying down on the job. Callie felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice level. The chair didn't work. He could sense when I was sitting up, when I might put him down. The only way he would truly rest was if I was lying flat, if he could feel completely secure. So yes, I lay on the floor, because that's what he needed. What he needed? Harrison stepped closer, and Callie could smell his expensive cologne mixed with a lingering scent of wine from his dinner. He's 8 months old. What he needs is structure, routine, proper sleep training. Not to be coddled every time he makes a sound. The words hit Callie like a slap. She looked down at Noah, who had finally quieted in her arms, his dark eyes heavy with exhaustion. His little fingers were still twisted in her scrubs, as if he was afraid she might disappear. With respect, Mr. Blake, when did you last spend an entire day with your son? The question came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't regret it. When did you last see him go 12 hours refusing to sleep unless someone held him? When did you last watch him cry himself sick because he needed comfort and couldn't understand why no one would give it to him? Harrison's face darkened. I don't need parenting advice from help. The words hung in the air like poison. Callie felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she refused to flinch. She had heard worse, endured worse, but it still stung coming from a man whose child she had been caring for with her whole heart. Is that what you think I am? She asked quietly. Just to help. You're an employee, Harrison said, but something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by his own words. A well-paid employee who I trusted to maintain professional boundaries. This, he gestured at the rumpled nursery floor, is not professional. Callie shifted Noah to her hip, where he settled contentedly, his breathing deep and even. You want to know what's not professional? Leaving your son for 14 hours while he's clearly going through something difficult. Coming home after midnight and being angry that someone cared enough to comfort him. Being more concerned about appearances than about his well-being. How dare you? How dare I what? Callie's voice rose slightly, and Noah stirred against her shoulder. She immediately gentled her tone, rubbing soothing circles on the baby's back. How dare I love him? How dare I put his needs before my own comfort? How dare I lie on a cold floor for hours, because it was the only thing that helped him sleep? Harrison stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as if he couldn't find words. Something in Callie's tone, in the fierce protectiveness radiating from her, seemed to catch him off guard. You don't understand, he said finally, but his voice had lost some of its earlier venom. There are protocols. There are proper ways to handle these situations. You can't just make up solutions as you go along. Protocols? Callie almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mr. Blake, babies don't read parenting manuals. They don't care about your protocols or your schedules or your ideas about proper behavior. They're tiny humans with big feelings and no way to express them except crying. Sometimes the only protocol that matters is love. She moved toward the changing table, needing something to do with her hands. Noah had fallen back asleep against her shoulder, his body completely relaxed in a way that proved her point better than any argument could. Look at him, she said softly, turning so Harrison could see his son's peaceful face. When did you last see him this calm, this settled? He's been fighting sleep all day, crying every time I try to put him down. But the moment he felt safe, the moment he knew I wasn't going anywhere, he finally relaxed. Harrison did look, and for a moment, his expression softened. Noah's face was serene, his long eyelashes casting shadows on his chubby cheeks. His mouth was slightly open, and he made the soft snuffling sounds that babies make in deep sleep. He looks like his mother when he sleeps, Harrison said quietly, almost to himself. The admission seemed to surprise him, as if he hadn't meant to say it aloud. Callie saw something shift in his face, a crack in the armor of anger and control he'd been wearing since he walked into the room. She was beautiful, Callie said gently. I can see her in his expressions sometimes. The way he smiles when he's really happy. The way he tilts his head when he's curious about something. Harrison's throat worked as he swallowed hard. She would have known what to do. She would have had him sleeping through the night by now, on a proper schedule. She was good with children. She taught kindergarten before we got married. And she would have done exactly what I did tonight, Callie said with quiet conviction. She would have put his needs first, no matter how uncomfortable it made her. Because that's what mothers do. The word mothers seemed to hit Harrison like a physical blow. His face went pale, and he took a step backward. "You're not his mother," he said, but the words came out strangled, lacking conviction. "No," Callie agreed sadly. "I'm not. But I'm the closest thing he is right now, and I won't apologize for that. I won't apologize for caring about him more than I care about keeping my uniform clean or maintaining some arbitrary professional distance." She moved to the rocking chair and sat down carefully, settling Noah more comfortably against her chest. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake, his trust in her absolute and heartbreaking. "You hired me to take care of him," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "And that's what I'm doing. Not just feeding him and changing his diapers and making sure he's safe. Actually caring for him, loving him, being there when he needs comfort, even if it means sleeping on a marble floor." Harrison stood frozen in the doorway, watching his son sleep peacefully in another woman's arms. The sight should have filled him with gratitude, but instead it filled him with something darker and more complicated. Guilt, maybe, or envy, or the terrible recognition that his son had formed a bond with Callie that Harrison himself had never managed to create. "He doesn't sleep like that for me," Harrison admitted, the words pulled from somewhere deep and unwilling. "When I hold him, he cries. When I try to put him down, he gets upset. But with you, with me, he feels safe," Callie finished gently. "Because I've been here every day for 6 months. Because I've learned his rhythms and his needs. Because I've shown him, through my actions, that I won't abandon him when he's distressed." The implication hung heavy between them. Harrison's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Are you suggesting that I've abandoned my son?" "I'm suggesting that grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do," Callie said carefully. "I'm suggesting that sometimes loving someone means getting help when you can't be what they need. And I'm suggesting that maybe, instead of being angry that your son has someone who loves him, you might consider being grateful." What do you think about Callie's response to Harrison's anger? Should she have been more deferential, or was she right to stand her ground? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and barely contained emotions. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside the nursery, time seemed suspended. Noah slept on, oblivious to the tension crackling between the two adults who had become the center of his small world. Harrison Blake, billionaire and business genius, stared at his son and felt like a complete failure. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled only by Noah's soft breathing and the distant hum of the house's heating system. Harrison's face had gone from angry red to an ashen pale, but his jaw remained clenched with stubborn pride. He turned away from the sight of his son sleeping peacefully in Callie's arms, running both hands through his dark hair. "You don't understand the position you've put me in," he said finally, his voice tight with control. "I have responsibilities, standards to maintain. If anyone saw this, if word got out that my nanny was sleeping on floors with my child, what would people think?" Callie adjusted Noah's position slightly, her movements careful and practiced. "With respect, Mr. Blake, who exactly would see this? It's almost midnight. The only people in this house are Maria, Carlos, and us. And honestly, what people think matters less than what your son needs. What people think matters when it affects my business," Harrison shot back, pacing to the window that overlooked the city lights below. "When it affects my ability to provide for him. I have investors, board members, clients who trust me to make sound decisions. How does it look if I can't even manage my own household properly?" "Manage." The word came out sharper than Callie intended. "Is that what you think this is? Management?" Harrison spun around to face her, his eyes flashing. "Yes, that's exactly what this is. I hired you to do a job according to professional standards. There are proper ways to handle difficult children. Sleep training methods. Established routines that don't involve employees sleeping on the floor. Callie felt her temper flare, but she forced herself to keep her voice low for Noah's sake. Let me ask you something, Mr. Blake. When you were 8 months old and your mother died, would you have wanted to be sleep trained? Would you have wanted to cry alone in a dark room until you gave up hope that anyone would come? The comparison hit its mark. Harrison's face went white and his hands trembled slightly. That's completely different. My mother didn't die when I was a baby. Noah's mother did, Callie said quietly. And whether he understands it consciously or not, he feels that loss. He feels the absence of the woman who carried him for 9 months, whose heartbeat was the first sound he ever heard. Sometimes he needs extra comfort to feel secure in a world that already took away the most important person in his life. Stop. Harrison's voice was raw. Just stop. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Callie said, standing up slowly and moving to the window where Harrison stood. Noah remained deeply asleep against her shoulder, his tiny hand fisted in her uniform. I know what it's like to lose someone who is supposed to take care of you. I know what it's like to cry and have no one come. And I know what it's like to finally find someone who will. Harrison stared out at the city lights, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Elena read every parenting book ever written. She had charts and schedules and theories about child development. She would never have approved of what you did tonight. Maybe not, Callie admitted. But she's not here, and you are. And your son needed comfort tonight, not theory. My son needs structure, Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. He needs boundaries and routines and proper sleep habits, not to be indulged every time he's unhappy. Callie shifted Noah to her other arm, noting how he instinctively curled closer to her warmth even in sleep. Mr. Blake, can I ask you something? When did you last hold him for more than 5 minutes? When did you last sit with him when he was upset instead of calling for me? Harrison's shoulders tensed. I don't see how that's relevant. It's relevant because you're making decisions about his care without understanding his needs. You see him crying and assume he's being manipulative or difficult, but he's not. He's grieving too, in the only way an 8-month-old knows how. Babies don't grieve, Harrison said automatically, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Of course they do. They just don't have words for it. They have feelings, big, overwhelming feelings they can't understand or express. So they cry, and they need someone to hold them and tell them, through actions not words, that they're safe and loved and that someone will always come when they call. Harrison turned from the window to face her directly. And you think that someone should be you. It wasn't a question, and Callie heard the accusation beneath it. I think that someone should be whoever is willing to do it. Right now, that's me. But it could be you if you wanted it to be. I didn't ask for your opinion on my parenting. No, you asked for an explanation of why I was on the floor with your son. I'm giving you one. He needed comfort. I provided it. End of story. Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. End of story? Do you have any idea what kind of liability issues this creates? What happens if you fall asleep and roll over on him? What happens if he gets hurt while you're unconscious on the floor? Do you think my insurance covers nannies using my child as a pillow? Callie's eyes flashed with anger. I wasn't using him as anything. I was giving him what he needed to feel safe enough to sleep. And I wasn't unconscious. I was resting while staying alert to his needs, which is what good parents do. You're not his parent, Harrison snapped. You're an employee, a well-paid employee who seems to have forgotten her place. The words hung in the air like a slap. Callie felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, but she refused to flinch. She had heard worse from people who mattered less. My place, she repeated slowly. And where exactly is that, Mr. Blake? In your opinion, what is my place? Harrison opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to realize he was treading on dangerous ground. But the damage was already done. The words he hadn't said hung between them anyway, loaded with implications about class and race and the invisible lines that weren't supposed to be crossed. Your place is to provide professional childcare during business hours according to established protocols, he said finally, his tone formal and cold. Not to make unilateral decisions about my son's care based on your personal feelings. My personal feelings? Callie's voice rose slightly, and Noah stirred against her shoulder. She immediately lowered it, rubbing gentle circles on the baby's back. My personal feelings are the only reason your son sleeps peacefully most nights. My personal feelings are why he's healthy and happy and developing normally despite losing his mother. My personal feelings are the only things standing between him and the kind of cold, mechanical care you seem to prefer. I prefer professional care from someone who understands boundaries. And I prefer compassionate care from someone who understands children. Apparently we want different things. They stared at each other across the nursery, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Noah slept on, oblivious to the battle being fought over his small body. Maybe we do, Harrison said quietly. Maybe that's the problem. Callie felt something shift in the room, a change in the quality of Harrison's anger. It was still there, but now it seemed mixed with something else. Uncertainty maybe, or fear. There's no problem except the one you're creating, she said. Noah is happy and healthy. He's meeting all his developmental milestones. He's attached to me, yes, but that's not a bad thing. It means he feels secure enough to form bonds. It means he trusts that someone will be there when he needs them. And what happens when you leave? Harrison asked, and for the first time his voice cracked slightly. What happens when he's attached to someone who isn't permanent? What happens when he loses another person he depends on? There it was. The real fear beneath all the anger and protocol and professional boundaries. Harrison wasn't worried about liability or appearances or proper procedures. He was terrified that his son would suffer another loss. Callie saw it in his face, the moment his mask slipped and revealed the grief-stricken father underneath the billionaire CEO. Her anger softened, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to sympathy. I'm not planning to leave, she said gently. I'm not going anywhere unless you make me go. Everyone leaves, Harrison said, so quietly she almost missed it. Eventually, everyone leaves. What do you think Harrison means by everyone leaves? Is he talking about more than just losing his wife? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to hit that like button if you're feeling the emotional weight of this story. The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable and completely at odds with the powerful, controlled man who had walked into the nursery 20 minutes earlier. Callie realized she was seeing the real Harrison Blake for the first time since she'd started working for him. Not the billionaire or the CEO or the demanding employer, but a man who had lost everything that mattered and was terrified of losing what little he had left. Mr. Blake, she said softly, but he had already turned away, rebuilding his walls as quickly as they had crumbled. It's late, he said, his voice once again cold and professional. Put him in his crib and go home. We'll discuss this situation tomorrow. But Callie knew that wasn't going to work. Noah was still deeply asleep against her chest, his body completely relaxed in a way that suggested he would wake the moment she tried to put him down. And she was right. The second she attempted to lower him into his crib, his eyes flew open and he began to cry. Noah's cries shattered the tense silence like breaking glass. His small body went rigid with distress as Callie tried to settle him in his crib, his face turning red as his wails grew more desperate. She immediately lifted him back to her chest, and his crying subsided to hiccuping sobs. See, Callie said quietly, swaying from side to side as she rubbed Noah's back. This is what I've been dealing with all day. He won't stay down. Harrison watched his son's face crumple with renewed crying as Callie attempted once more to place him in the crib. The sound cut through him like a blade, triggering some primal response he didn't understand. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Try again, he said tersely. He needs to learn to self-soothe. Mr. Blake, with respect, he's 8 months old. He doesn't have the neurological development to self-soothe when he's this distressed. Callie lifted Noah again, and once more he quieted against her shoulder. Sometimes babies go through phases where they need extra security. It's completely normal. Nothing about this situation feels normal, Harrison muttered, but he couldn't deny the evidence before his eyes. His son was clearly in distress when separated from Callie, and peaceful when held by her. Callie tried a different approach. She sat in the rocking chair with Noah, waiting until his breathing deepened and his body went limp with sleep. Then, moving with infinite care, she attempted to transfer him to the crib. But the moment his back touched the mattress, his eyes flew open and he began crying again. "This is ridiculous," Harrison said, his frustration mounting. "There has to be a solution that doesn't involve you sleeping on the floor." "I'm open to suggestions," Callie replied, lifting Noah once more. "But I've tried everything else. The swing, the bouncy seat, playing music, white noise, dimming the lights, keeping the bright. The only thing that works is contact with me." Harrison began pacing the length of the nursery, his mind working through the problem like it was a business challenge. There had to be a logical solution. There always was. What about a sleep consultant? Someone who specializes in this sort of thing? "You could try that," Callie agreed. "But most sleep training methods involve letting babies cry it out. Are you prepared to listen to him scream for hours? Because that's what it would take, and there's no guarantee it would work." As if to emphasize her point, Noah began fussing again, even though he was securely in her arms. Callie stood and began walking around the room, humming softly under her breath. The baby's cries subsided, but he remained alert and clingy. "He's overtired," she explained. "The more exhausted he gets, the harder it becomes for him to settle. It's a vicious cycle." Harrison stopped pacing and really looked at his son for the first time that night. Noah's eyes were red-rimmed and glassy with fatigue, but every time they started to drift closed, he would jerk awake as if afraid of losing consciousness. "When did this start?" Harrison asked. "About a week ago. It's been getting progressively worse. Today was the worst day yet." Callie settled back into the rocking chair, adjusting Noah so he was lying across her lap. "I think he might be going through a developmental leap. Sometimes that disrupts sleep patterns." "A developmental leap?" "Around 8 to 10 months, babies go through major cognitive changes. They start understanding object permanence, which means they realize when you leave the room, you still exist somewhere else. It can cause separation anxiety." Harrison frowned. "So he's crying because he's smarter?" Despite the tension between them, Callie smiled slightly. "In a way, yes. His brain is developing the ability to miss people when they're gone. It's actually a good sign, cognitively speaking, but it makes them more clingy temporarily." "How temporarily?" "Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. Every baby is different." Harrison sank into the chair across from her, suddenly feeling exhausted himself. "So what are you suggesting? That you sleep on the floor for weeks?" "I'm suggesting that we prioritize his well-being over conventional methods. If that means I sleep in here for a while, then that's what we do." "Absolutely not." Harrison's voice was firm. "That's completely inappropriate. What if someone saw? What if word got out? I have a reputation to maintain, and so does this family." Callie looked at him steadily. "So your reputation is more important than your son's sleep?" "That's not what I said. It's what you implied." They stared at each other across the room, neither willing to back down. Noah had finally settled into a doze on Callie's lap, his breathing deep and even. But both adults knew that the moment she tried to move him, he would wake up crying. "There has to be another solution," Harrison insisted. "Something that doesn't compromise professional boundaries." "Like what?" "I don't know. Different furniture? A bassinet in your room? Hiring a night nurse?" Callie shook her head. "Moving him to my room would be even more inappropriate than what I did tonight. And a night nurse is just another stranger. He's bonded with me. Introducing someone new right now would make the separation anxiety worse." Harrison rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. "So what you're telling me is that there's no solution except you sleeping in here." "I'm telling you that your son is going through a difficult phase, and he needs consistent comfort from someone he trusts. Whether that's me or you doesn't matter, but it needs to be someone." "Me?" Harrison's laugh was bitter. "I told you before, he cries when I hold him. Have you tried recently? Or are you basing that on how he reacted months ago when he barely knew you?" The question hit home. Harrison realized he hadn't attempted to comfort Noah in weeks. Every time the baby cried, he called for Callie or Maria. It was easier than facing his own inadequacy as a father. "He doesn't know me," Harrison admitted quietly. "Then maybe this is an opportunity to change that." Before Harrison could respond, Noah stirred in Callie's arms and began to fuss. She tried soothing him with gentle touches and soft words, but his crying escalated quickly. His little face screwed up with distress, and he arched his back as if trying to escape some invisible discomfort. "What's wrong?" Harrison asked, alarmed by the intensity of his son's cries. "I don't know. He was fine a minute ago." Callie stood and began walking with Noah, but he continued to wail. Sometimes babies have bad dreams or get startled awake. The sound of his son's cries triggered something visceral in Harrison. Without thinking, he stood up and reached for the baby. "Let me try." Callie hesitated for a moment, then carefully transferred Noah to his father's arms. The baby's cries intensified for a moment, his little fist batting at Harrison's chest. But Harrison didn't give up. He held his son close, mimicking the swaying motion he'd seen Callie use. "Shoo," he murmured, his voice uncertain. "It's okay. Daddy's here." The word daddy felt foreign on his tongue. He'd been avoiding it for months, unable to reconcile the title with his own feelings of inadequacy. But something about saying it aloud, about claiming the role publicly, seemed to calm them both. Noah's cries gradually subsided to sniffles, though he remained tense in Harrison's arms. His dark eyes, so much like Elena's, stared up at his father with what looked like curiosity rather than fear. "He's looking at you," Callie observed softly. "He looks confused," Harrison replied, but there was wonder in his voice. "Like he's trying to figure out who I am." "Talk to him." Babies recognize voices even when they can't understand words. Harrison felt awkward and exposed, but he forced himself to speak. "Hey there, Noah. I know I haven't been around much lately. I know Callie takes better care of you than I do. But I'm your dad. I'm trying to figure out how to do this." Noah's eyes remained fixed on his father's face, and slowly, incredibly, his body began to relax. He didn't fall asleep the way he did with Callie, but he stopped crying and seemed content to be held. "He's listening to you," Callie said, and Harrison could hear the smile at her voice. "Yeah, he is." Harrison felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief and fear he'd been carrying for 8 months. "Hi, buddy. I'm sorry it took me so long to really see you." They stood there in the quiet nursery, father and son getting acquainted while Callie watched from across the room. For the first time since Noah's birth, Harrison felt like he might actually be capable of being a father. But the moment couldn't last forever. After about 10 minutes, Noah began to fuss again, reaching toward Callie with grasping fingers. Harrison tried to soothe him, but the baby's cries grew more insistent. "He wants you," Harrison said, but there was no anger in his voice this time, just resignation and perhaps a touch of sadness. Callie took Noah back, and he immediately settled against her chest with a contented sigh. The contrast was stark and undeniable. "It's not personal," she said gently. "He's just used to me. But you did great. Did you see how he calmed down when you talked to him?" Harrison nodded, but the brief moment of connection had only emphasized how far he had to go. "So what now? We can't all stay in here all night." As if in response to his words, Noah's eyes began to droop. His breathing deepened, and his body went limp with exhaustion. Callie waited until she was certain he was deeply asleep, then moved toward the crib. But just like before, the moment she tried to lay him down, he woke up crying. They were back where they started, trapped in the nursery by a baby who would only sleep in Callie's arms, and both adults were beginning to understand that this was going to be a very long night. "We need to find a solution," Harrison said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. He was starting to realize that some problems couldn't be solved with money or authority or corporate strategies. Sometimes, the only solution was love, patience, and time. The clock on the nursery wall read 1:23 a.m., and Noah had finally fallen into a deeper sleep in Callie's arms. She remained perfectly still in the rocking chair, afraid that even the slightest movement might wake him. Harrison sat across from her in the other chair, watching his son's peaceful face with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Tell me about the night he was born," Callie said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past 20 minutes. Harrison's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Why would you want to know that?" "Because I've been taking care of him for 6 months, and I don't know anything about how he came into this world." All I know is that his mother died, and you hire me 3 weeks later." Callie adjusted Noah slightly, careful not to disturb his sleep. "If I'm going to understand why he needs so much comfort, maybe I need to understand what happened." Harrison was quiet for so long that Callie thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It was supposed to be perfect. Elena had planned everything down to the minute. She had a birth plan, a playlist, specific lighting she wanted in the delivery room. She'd been preparing for months. His hands clenched in his lap. The pregnancy was textbook normal. No complications, no warning signs. She was healthy and strong and so excited to meet him. Callie waited, sensing there was more. Labor started on a Tuesday morning in May. Elena was calm, excited even. She kept saying this was the day we'd been waiting for. We got to the hospital. Everything was progressing normally, and then Harrison's voice cracked. Something went wrong during delivery. Placental abruption. She started bleeding, and they couldn't stop it. "I'm sorry," Callie said softly. "That must have been terrifying." "They had to choose," Harrison continued, as if he hadn't heard her. "Save Elena or save the baby." Elena was unconscious by then, losing too much blood. The doctors looked at me and said I had seconds to decide. Callie felt her breath catch. "What did you do?" "I chose my wife." The words came out flat and emotionless. "I told them to save Elena, but it was too late. They managed to deliver Noah, but Elena was already gone. I lost them both for about 3 minutes until they got his heart beating again." The room fell silent except for Noah's soft breathing. Callie looked down at the baby in her arms, imagining him fighting for life in those first critical moments while his father made an impossible choice. "So you see," Harrison said, his voice hollow, "my son exists because my wife died. Every time I look at him, I'm reminded that I failed to save the person I loved most in the world. And he nearly died too, in the process." "That's not your fault," Callie said firmly. "None of that was your fault, wasn't it?" Elena wanted to have the baby at home originally. She wanted natural birth, no interventions. "I'm the one who insisted on the hospital because I thought it would be safer. I'm the one who chose the doctor. I'm the one who made the decision that killed her." Callie shifted Noah to her shoulder and leaned forward. "Mr. Blake, look at me. You didn't kill your wife. A medical emergency killed your wife. Something that happens to thousands of women every year, despite the best medical care available. You didn't cause it, and you couldn't have prevented it. You don't understand. Elena trusted me to keep her safe. She trusted me to make the right decisions for our family. And when it mattered most, I failed her. You saved your son's life. I chose him over her," Harrison said bitterly. "What kind of husband does that make me?" Callie was quiet for a moment, processing the weight of his confession. "It makes you a father who was put in an impossible situation and had to make a choice no parent should ever have to make. And I think Elena would understand that. You didn't know her." "No, but I know she loved this baby enough to spend months planning for his arrival. I know she would want him to be happy and healthy and loved. And I know she wouldn't want you torturing yourself with guilt over something that was completely out of your control." Harrison stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the pre-dawn darkness. "The first time a hospital let me hold him, he cried the entire time. The nurses said it was normal, that babies can sense stress. But I knew he could feel it. The guilt, the grief, the resentment." Resentment. Harrison's shoulders sagged. For existing when she didn't. For being the reason she was gone. "I know that's terrible. I know he's innocent. But every time I looked at him those first few weeks, all I could think was that he was alive and she wasn't." Callie felt tears prick her eyes. She understood now why Noah had such trouble sleeping, why he needed constant reassurance that someone would be there. He had spent his first weeks of life feeling his father's conflicted emotions, absorbing the grief and guilt that filled the house. "When did that change?" she asked gently. "I'm not sure it has," Harrison admitted. "Some days are better than others. When you started working here and he began to thrive, it got easier. But the guilt never goes away. The feeling that I chose wrong, that I should have found a way to save them both. Can I tell you something?" Callie asked, and Harrison turned from the window to look at her. "Noah has never felt unwanted to me. Confused sometimes, maybe, like he's searching for something he can't name. but not unwanted. You may think you resent him, but your love is there. He feels it. How can you be so sure? Because I know what it feels like when a child isn't wanted. I know what that does to them. Callie's voice grew quiet. My baby sister died when she was 6 months old, not from medical emergency or an accident, from neglect. Harrison stared at her, clearly not expecting this revelation. My mother was 17 when she had me, 21 when Keisha was born. She was struggling with addiction, mental health issues, and poverty. She tried her best with me, but by the time Keisha came along, she was barely functioning. Callie's hand unconsciously rubbed circles on Noah's back as she spoke. I was only 4, but I remember trying to take care of Keisha when Mom couldn't get out of bed. Trying to feed her, change her, make her stop crying. What happened? Mom left us alone for 3 days while she went on a bender. I tried to take care of Keisha, but I was just a baby myself. When the neighbors finally called social services, Keisha was dehydrated and malnourished. She died in the hospital 2 days later. Harrison sat down heavily, his face pale. God, Callie, I'm sorry. I went into foster care after that. Bounced around for years, always wondering if I could have done something different. Always carrying the guilt of not being able to save her. Callie looked down at Noah's sleeping face. But I learned something important in those years. I learned the difference between a child who isn't wanted and a child whose parent is struggling to love them properly. And what's the difference? Wanted children get the care they need, even if it's not perfect. Someone fights for them, provides for them, makes sure they're safe. Your son has all of those things. He has a beautiful home, excellent medical care, nutritious food, and people who love him. That's not what unwanted looks like. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it wasn't relevant before. But now you need to understand that your grief doesn't make you a bad father. It makes you human. And Noah doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be present. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be around him without thinking about what it cost to bring him here. Callie stood carefully, still holding the sleeping baby. Can I show you something? She walked to Harrison's chair and knelt beside it, angling Noah so his father could see his face clearly. Look at his expression when he sleeps. Really look. Harrison studied his son's features. Noah's face was completely relaxed, his mouth slightly open, long eyelashes resting on his chubby cheeks. He looks peaceful, Harrison said softly. More than peaceful. He looks content, secure, like he knows he's exactly where he belongs. Callie smiled at the sleeping baby. That's not the face of a child who feels unwanted. That's the face of a child who knows he's loved, even when that love is complicated. Do you think Harrison will be able to move past his guilt and truly bond with Noah? What would you do in a situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories. Harrison reached out tentatively and touched Noah's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around his father's thumb, holding on even in sleep. He's stronger than I thought, Harrison whispered. Babies are incredibly resilient. They're designed to form attachments even in difficult circumstances. But Noah won't wait forever for you to figure out how to love him without guilt. Eventually, he'll stop reaching out if no one reaches back. The words hung in the air like a warning. Harrison looked at his son's hand wrapped around his thumb and felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time since Noah's birth, the guilt was overshadowed by something else. Fear. Not fear of loving Noah, but fear of losing him. I don't want that to happen, he said quietly. Then don't let it. Start tonight. Start now. As if summoned by their conversation, Noah stirred in Callie's arms. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused and drowsy. Instead of crying immediately, he looked around the room until his gaze landed on Harrison's face. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other. Then Noah smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. And Harrison Blake, billionaire and businessman, felt his heart break open with love for his son. Noah's smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Harrison felt his breath catch as his son's tiny face lit up with pure joy, those dark eyes sparkling with recognition and something that looked remarkably like love. For a moment, the entire world seemed to narrow down to that single, perfect expression. He's smiling at you, Callie whispered, her own face glowing with happiness. Really smiling, not just gas or reflexes. He recognizes you. Harrison's throat felt tight with emotion he didn't know how to process. He's never done that before. Not for me. Because you've never really looked at him before. Not like this. Not when you weren't thinking about everything else. Callie shifted Noah slightly so he could see his father better. Babies are intuitive. They can sense when we're truly present with them. Noah made a soft cooing sound, reaching one chubby hand toward Harrison's face. Without thinking, Harrison leaned closer, letting his son's tiny fingers explore his cheek. The touch was feather-light, but somehow managed to anchor him in a way nothing had for months. His hands are so small, Harrison murmured, marveling at the perfection of those miniature fingers. I'd forgotten how small they are. He's grown so much since I started working here. When I first met him, he could barely hold his head up. Now look at him. Callie demonstrated by helping Noah sit up slightly, showing how he could support himself with minimal assistance. He's been reaching all his milestones, rolling over, sitting up, babbling. He even said something that sounded like Mama last week. Harrison's face fell slightly. Mama. Babies always say Mama first, even when they're bottle-fed. It's easier to pronounce than Dada. But watch this. Callie looked down at Noah and said clearly, "Can you say Dada? Dada?" Noah looked up at her with serious concentration, then turned to Harrison and made a sound that was unmistakably Dada. It was babbling, not conscious speech, but the timing was perfect. Harrison's eyes widened. Did he just? He's been practicing. I've been working with him on it during our playtime. Callie's smile was soft and encouraging. I thought you should be the first to hear it properly. The simple gesture, the fact that she had thought of him during moments he wasn't even present, hit Harrison harder than any business deal or professional achievement ever had. This woman had been not just caring for his son, but actively working to strengthen the bond between father and child, even when Harrison himself had been too emotionally paralyzed to try. Why? He asked quietly. Why would you do that when I've been so difficult? Callie suggested with a gentle smile. Because that baby doesn't care about any of the complicated adult emotions in this room. He just wants his daddy. And I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching. You love him. You're just scared. Noah began to fuss slightly, and Callie stood to walk with him. But instead of settling immediately, he reached toward Harrison with both arms, making the universal baby gesture for pick-me-up. He wants you, Callie said, extending Noah toward his father. Harrison hesitated for just a moment, then reached for his son. This time, when Noah settled against his chest, he didn't cry. Instead, he tucked his head under Harrison's chin and made contented little sounds. How do I? Harrison started, then stopped, overwhelmed by the responsibility of holding something so precious. Just hold him. Rock a little if he gets fussy. Talk to him. Babies love the sound of their parents' voices. Callie settled back in her chair, watching father and son with obvious satisfaction. You're doing fine. Harrison began to sway gently, the motion feeling more natural than he'd expected. Noah's warm weight against his chest was comforting in a way he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in months, holding his son didn't feel like a reminder of loss. It felt like a promise of something new. Elena would have loved seeing this, he said softly, surprising himself by bringing up his wife without the usual stab of guilt. She always said you had the gentlest hands. She would have been amazed at how good you are with babies. Tell me about her, Callie said. What was she like? Harrison was quiet for a moment, processing memories that usually brought only pain. But with Noah warm and content in his arms, the memories felt different. Softer somehow. She was a kindergarten teacher when we met, 5 years younger than me. But she had this way of making everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the room. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. She used to say that children were just small people with big feelings, and if you respected the feelings, the behavior usually sorted itself out. She sounds wise. She would have figured out Noah's sleep issues weeks ago. Probably would have been on that floor with him the first night he needed it, without caring what anyone thought about professional boundaries. Harrison looked down at his son, who was listening to his voice with rapt attention. She would have understood what you did tonight. I think she would have done exactly what I did tonight, Callie agreed, because she would have put his needs first, just like any good mother would. You're not just a good nanny, Harrison said quietly. You're a good mother to him. I've been too proud and too scared to admit that, but it's true. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to explore. Callie felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away from Harrison's steady gaze. He needs us both, she said finally. Different things from each of us, but he needs us both. What does he need from me? I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know baby songs or games or how to make him laugh the way you do. Callie watched as Noah grabbed Harrison's tie and tried to put it in his mouth, giggling when his father gently extracted it. You're already doing it. You're being present. You're letting him explore and discover things. You're giving him your attention without trying to fix or control anything. It feels so different than I expected. Scarier, but also, Harrison searched for the right word. Easier? I kept thinking it would be this overwhelming responsibility, but right now, it just feels like spending time with a very small person who happens to be related to me. That's exactly what it is. Noah doesn't need you to be a perfect father. He just needs you to be his father, to show up, to be patient, to let him know that you're not going anywhere. As if to emphasize the point, Noah yawned hugely and settled more deeply against Harrison's chest. His breathing began to slow and deepen, and his tiny fists relaxed their grip on his father's shirt. He's falling asleep, Harrison whispered, afraid to move and disturb the moment. Keep doing what you're doing. Rock just a little, keep your breathing deep and steady. Babies can sense when we're calm. Harrison found himself falling into the rhythm naturally. The gentle swaying motion, the warmth of his son's body, the soft sounds of Noah's breathing all combined to create a bubble of peace he hadn't experienced in months. For the first time since Elena's death, he felt truly present in his own life instead of just going through the motions. This is what I was missing, he said quietly. All these months, I thought taking care of him meant providing things. The best nursery, the best nanny, the best of everything money could buy. But it's not about the things, is it? Things don't hurt when you leave them. Things don't smile when they see you. Things don't need comfort in the middle of the night. Callie's voice was gentle but firm. Noah doesn't care that this house is worth millions of dollars. He cares that you're here, holding him, making him feel safe. I've wasted so much time, Harrison said, his voice thick with regret. 6 months of his life that I can never get back. You haven't wasted anything. Every day is a chance to start over, to build something new. And look, she gestured to Noah, who was now deeply asleep in his father's arms, completely relaxed and trusting. He's not holding any grudges. He's just happy you're here now. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both adults marveling at the sleeping baby who had somehow managed to bridge the gap between them. The tension that filled the room earlier had dissipated, replaced by something warmer and more hopeful. Callie, Harrison said eventually, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for taking care of him when I couldn't, for loving him when I was too broken to figure out how, for being patient with both of us. You don't need to thank me. This is what I do. It's who I am. No, it's more than that. You could have just done your job, collected your paycheck, gone home at the end of the day. Instead, you fought for him. You slept on a cold marble floor because it's what he needed. You worked on his speech development so he could connect with me. You saw what this family needed and you provided it, even when I was too stubborn to appreciate it. Harrison looked at her directly, his expression serious and grateful. I don't know what would have happened to us without you. I don't want to know. The words seemed to surprise them both. Callie felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sleeping baby and everything to do with the man holding him. For the first time since she'd started working here, she allowed herself to truly see Harrison Blake not as her employer, but as a person, a father learning to love his son, a man healing from devastating loss, someone who might need her as much as Noah did. Patricia turned to Harrison with a look of disappointed authority. Honestly, darling, I expected better judgment from you. Harrison held Noah closer, the baby's cries now reducing to hiccuping sobs as he sensed his father's protective embrace. Callie has been wonderful with him. He's thriving under her care. He's thriving? The child can't sleep without his employee present. He has no structure, no discipline, no proper routine. This is what you call thriving. He's happy, Harrison said, but Callie could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. He's healthy and developing normally, and he's happy. Happiness isn't the goal, Harrison. Character is the goal. Strength is the goal. Independence is the goal. Blake children don't cling to the help like common babies. They learn early that they can depend only on family. Patricia's words were finding their mark. Callie could see doubt growing in Harrison's eyes as he looked down at his son, who was indeed clinging to him while reaching toward her. Maybe she has a point, Harrison said quietly, almost to himself. Maybe we have created some unhealthy dynamics. The words hit Callie like a physical blow. After everything they had shared tonight, after the breakthrough they had experienced, he was willing to dismiss it all because his mother disapproved. Harrison, she said softly, you know what we discovered tonight. You felt it too. The connection with Noah, the understanding between us. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Connection. Patricia laughed harshly. Is that what we're calling it? How convenient. And I suppose this connection extends beyond professional boundaries? How far exactly has this inappropriate relationship progressed? The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Callie felt her face burn with humiliation and rage. There is nothing inappropriate about my relationship with your son or your grandson. I am a professional caregiver who has been doing my job with dedication and love. Love. Patricia seized on the word like a weapon. There's the problem, right there. Professional caregivers don't love their charges. They provide services. When emotions get involved, boundaries blur. Lines get crossed. Before you know it, the help starts thinking they're family. Callie looked at Harrison, waiting for him to defend her, to stand up for what they had built together. But he was staring at Noah with a troubled expression, clearly wrestling with his mother's poisonous words. Harrison, Patricia continued, her voice softening to a maternal persuasion, you're grieving. You're vulnerable. It's natural that you might confuse gratitude with something deeper. But you need to think clearly about what's best for Noah, and what's best for our family's reputation. I know what's best for Noah, Callie said, her voice stronger than she felt. I've been here every day for 6 months. I've seen him through every milestone, every illness, every difficult night. I know what he needs. You know what you think he needs, Patricia corrected coldly. But you're not his mother. You're not his family. You're temporary help who has clearly lost perspective on your role. The words temporary help echoed in the silence that followed. Callie felt something inside her chest crumble. Despite everything that had happened tonight, despite the breakthrough and the bonding and the mutual understanding, she was still just temporary help to this family. Harrison finally looked up from Noah, and when his eyes met Callie's, she saw something that destroyed her. Uncertainty, doubt, the return of the emotional walls she thought they had torn down together. Maybe, he said slowly, we should discuss this in the morning when everyone is thinking more clearly. It wasn't an outright dismissal, but it wasn't the defense she had hoped for either. Harrison Blake, who had held his son and talked about fresh starts and second chances, was backing away from everything they had discovered together. Of course, Callie said, her voice carefully neutral. I think that's probably best. She moved toward the door, but Noah saw her leaving and began crying again, reaching for her with desperate arms. The sound broke Callie's heart, but she forced herself to keep walking. See, Patricia said triumphantly, unhealthy dependence. This is exactly what I was talking about. Callie paused in the doorway and looked back at Harrison, who was struggling to comfort his crying son. For a moment, their eyes met, and she saw regret and confusion and apology in his gaze. But she also saw doubt, and doubt was enough to shatter everything they had built. I'll collect my things and be gone by morning, she said quietly. And with that, she walked out of the nursery, leaving behind the family she had dared to think might actually want her. What do you think about Patricia's accusations? Was she protecting her family or being deliberately cruel? Share your thoughts in the comments. And make sure to like this video if you're invested in seeing how this story ends. Behind her, Noah's cries grew louder and more desperate, but Callie forced herself to keep walking. She had made the mistake of believing she could be more than temporary help. She wouldn't make that mistake again. The sun was beginning to rise over Beverly Hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Callie couldn't appreciate through her tears. She sat on the edge of her small bed in the staff quarters behind the main house, mechanically folding her few belongings into the same worn duffel bag she'd carried from job to job for years. Her hands trembled as she packed the nursing textbooks she'd been studying during Noah's naps, the small photo of her sister Keisha that she kept on every nightstand, and the bright yellow cardigan Noah loved to grab during their playtime. Each item felt like another piece of her heart being torn away. From the main house, she could hear Noah's cries carrying across the morning air. He had been crying on and off for the past 3 hours, ever since she'd left the nursery. The sound was like a knife twisting in her chest, but she forced herself to keep packing. This was what happened when you forgot your place. This was the price of loving someone else's child. Meanwhile, in the nursery, Harrison paced the floor with his inconsolable son, his expensive shirt wrinkled and stained with tears and spit up. Nothing he tried seemed to work. Noah rejected the bottle, threw his favorite toys, and screamed whenever Harrison tried to put him down. "The only mistake I'm making is listening to you." Harrison moved toward the door, Noah still crying in his arms. "You can threaten my reputation all you want. You can tell your social circle whatever makes you feel powerful. But I will not sacrifice my son's well-being for your approval. You're making a terrible decision. That woman will ruin this family." Harrison paused in the doorway and looked back at his mother. "No, Mother. You've been trying to ruin this family for years with your coldness and your rules and your obsession with appearances. Callie is trying to save it. She's not family, Harrison. She'll never be family." "Maybe not," Harrison agreed. "But she's the closest thing to a mother Noah has ever known. And right now, that's more important than blood or money or social standing." With that, he walked out of the nursery, leaving his mother standing alone among the expensive furniture and perfect decor that had never provided comfort to anyone. Harrison made his way through the house and out the back door, Noah's cries growing more desperate with each step. He could see Callie through the window of the staff quarters, sitting on her bed with her packed bag beside her. Her shoulders were shaking, and even from a distance, he could see the tears on her face. The sight of her crying because of his family's cruelty filled him with a rage unlike anything he'd ever experienced. This woman had given everything to care for his son, had shown more love and dedication than many biological parents ever managed, and his mother had driven her away with threats and social manipulation. He knocked gently on her door, not wanting to startle her. "Callie, may I come in?" There was a long pause before she answered. "If this is about a reference letter, I can write one myself." "It's not about a reference letter. Please, I need to talk to you." Another pause, then the sound of footsteps. The door opened to reveal Callie's tear-stained face, her usually neat appearance disheveled from packing and crying. When she saw Noah in Harrison's arms, still fussing and reaching for her, her face crumpled. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't say goodbye to him again. It's too hard." "Then don't," Harrison said quietly. "Don't say goodbye. Please, Callie, come back. Both of you need each other, and I need both of you. Your mother made it very clear where I stand in this family. I'm temporary help who overstepped boundaries. I won't put myself through that again. My mother was wrong. About everything." Harrison shifted Noah to one arm and reached out to touch Callie's face gently. "You're not temporary help. You're not an employee who overstepped boundaries. You're the woman who saved my son's life and taught me how to be a father. Your family, Callie. The only family that matters." Will Harrison be able to convince Callie to stay? What would you do in her situation after being so publicly humiliated? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the emotional conclusion to this story. Callie stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. "What about your mother? What about your reputation and your business relationships?" "I don't care about any of that," Harrison said, and meant it. "I care about you and Noah and building something real together." Everything else is just noise. For the first time since leaving the nursery, Callie felt a spark of hope. But she had been hurt too deeply to trust easily. "I need to know you mean it," she said quietly. "I need to know you won't change your mind the next time someone questions our arrangement." Harrison looked down at his son, who had finally stopped crying and was reaching for Callie with desperate little hands. Then he looked back at the woman who had become essential to both their lives. "I've never meant anything more in my life," he said. "Please come home." Callie studied Harrison's face for a long moment, searching for any trace of the doubt that had flickered in his eyes hours earlier. What she saw instead was a man transformed. Gone was the uncertain, grief-stricken employer who had questioned her methods. In his place stood a father who had finally learned to trust his own heart. "Your mother won't just disappear," Callie said quietly, though she could feel her resolve weakening as Noah reached for her with increasing desperation. "She'll make our lives difficult." "Let her try," Harrison replied, his voice steady and sure. "I've spent 35 years trying to earn her approval. I'm done. The only approval I need now is Noah's and yours." Noah made a soft whimpering sound, and Callie couldn't resist taking him into her arms. The moment he felt her familiar embrace, his entire body relaxed. He tucked his head under her chin with a contented sigh that spoke louder than any words about where he felt safest. "See," Harrison said softly. "He knows where he belongs. We both do." Callie felt the last of her resistance crumble. "What are you saying, Harrison?" "I'm saying that somewhere between last night and this morning, I realized something. This isn't just about Noah needing you. I need you too. Not as an employee, not as hired help, but as—" He paused, searching for the right words. "As the person who helped me remember how to be human again." The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and hope. Callie looked down at Noah, who was now peaceful in her arms, then back at Harrison's earnest face. "I can't go through this again," she said quietly. "I can't love you both and then be dismissed because someone decides I'm not appropriate. My heart won't survive it." "Then don't love us as an employee," Harrison said, stepping closer. "Love us as family, real family, the kind that doesn't disappear when things get complicated." Before Callie could respond, Noah began babbling in her arms, making the sounds that had become so familiar over the past 6 months. But this time, he turned toward Harrison and said, clear as day, "Da-da." Harrison's face lit up with wonder. "Did he just—" "Da-da," Noah repeated, reaching one small hand toward his father while remaining secure in Callie's arms. "Da-da-da. He's been practicing," Callie said, tears starting fresh in her eyes. "I've been working with him because I wanted you to hear it. Even when I thought you didn't want to be his father, I wanted him to be able to call for you." Harrison reached out to touch his son's hand, and Noah immediately grasped his finger. "Mama," the baby said then, looking directly at Callie. "Ma-ma-ma." The word hit them both like lightning. Callie's breath caught in her throat, and Harrison felt something profound shift in his chest. Noah had just given them titles that transcended job descriptions and social boundaries. In his innocent, 8-month-old wisdom, he had declared them his parents. "He called you Mama," Harrison whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not," Callie started, but Harrison interrupted her gently. "You're everything that matters about being his mother. You love him, you protect him, you put his needs before your own comfort. You know his every sound and expression. You've been there for every milestone, every difficult night, every moment of joy." Harrison cupped her face with his free hand. "Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love does. And you love him more than anyone could ask for." Callie looked down at Noah, who was now contentedly playing with both their hands, completely unaware of a life-changing conversation happening above his head. "I do love him, more than I ever thought possible. And I love watching you love him. I love how you make him laugh, how you know exactly what he needs before he even cries for it. I love how you made me see that being his father wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present." Harrison's voice grew softer. "I love how you saved us both." The word love hung between them, carrying more weight than either of them had expected. Callie felt her heart racing as she realized that somewhere in the past 6 months, Her feelings for Harrison had grown far beyond professional respect. Watching him learn to be a father, seeing his gentleness with Noah, witnessing his struggle to heal from grief, she had fallen in love with the man beneath the billionaire facade. "Harrison," she said quietly, "what exactly are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to stay. Not as Noah's nanny, but as—" He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "As someone who belongs here. As someone who makes this house feel like a home instead of a museum. As someone who makes us a family. And your mother? Your business associates? Your social circle? We'll have to accept that my priorities have changed. That Noah's happiness and our family's well-being matter more than their opinions." Harrison smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes completely. "Besides, have you seen how happy he is with you? What kind of father would I be if I let anyone take that away from him?" As if to emphasize the point, Noah giggled and patted both their faces with his small hands, babbling contentedly in the language only babies understand. But his message was clear. He was exactly where he wanted to be, with the two people who loved him most. "There's something else," Harrison said, his voice growing more serious. "I've been thinking about what you said last night. About Elena, about guilt, about choosing to love despite loss. You were right. She would want Noah to be happy and loved. She would want me to move forward, not spend the rest of my life frozen in grief. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was. And I think she would have loved you. I think she would have seen what I see, how you love Noah without trying to replace her memory, how you honor what she wanted for him while giving him what he needs now." Callie felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were different from the tears she'd cried earlier. These were tears of relief, of hope, of a future she'd never dared to imagine. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we go inside and have breakfast as a family. We deal with whatever my mother throws at us together. We figure out how to raise Noah to be happy and healthy and loved." Harrison paused, then added with a small smile, "And maybe we explore what it means for two people to build something real together." Callie felt her heart skip. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Blake?" "I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner with me tonight, after Noah goes to sleep." As Harrison and Callie, not employer and employee. As two people who care about each other and want to see where that leads. "What about professional boundaries?" Callie teased gently. "I think we crossed those permanently when you slept on a marble floor for my son's comfort," Harrison replied with a laugh. "At this point, we're writing our own rules." Noah chose that moment to yawn hugely, reminding them both that despite the momentous conversation, he was still an 8-month-old baby who had been awake all night. "Someone needs a nap," Callie observed, settling Noah more comfortably in her arms. "We all do," Harrison agreed. "But first, let's go face whatever drama my mother has prepared for us." Together, they walked back toward the main house, Noah dozing peacefully between them. As they approached the back door, Callie hesitated. "What if this doesn't work? What if we're making a mistake?" Harrison stopped and turned to face her fully. "Then we'll figure it out as we go." "But Callie, look at him." He gestured to Noah, who was sleeping with the deep contentment that only comes from feeling completely secure. "Look at how peaceful he is when we're both here. That's not a mistake. That's exactly right." As they entered the house, they could hear Patricia's voice in the kitchen, apparently lecturing Maria about proper household management. But instead of feeling intimidated, Callie felt strengthened by Harrison's presence beside her. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Ready," she confirmed. They walked into the kitchen together, and Patricia immediately looked up from her conversation with Maria. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the sight of Harrison and Callie standing side by side, Noah peaceful in Callie's arms. "I see you've made your choice," Patricia said coldly. "Yes, I have," Harrison replied calmly. "I've chosen my son's happiness over your expectations. I've chosen love over fear. I've chosen to build a family based on what matters, not what looks good in social magazines." Patricia's face flushed red. "You'll regret this, Harrison. Mark my words. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to make it," Harrison said firmly. "Mother, you're welcome in this house when you're ready to treat Callie with the respect she deserves as a member of this family. Until then, I think it's best if you leave." For a moment, Patricia looked as if she might argue further. But something in Harrison's stance, in the protective way he positioned himself near Callie and Noah, seemed to convince her that this was a battle she couldn't win. "This isn't over," she said icily, gathering her purse. "Yes, it is," Harrison replied quietly. "It's been over for a long time. I just finally had the courage to admit it." After Patricia left, the kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Noah's peaceful breathing. Maria, who had witnessed the entire confrontation, smiled broadly at Callie. "Bienvenida a casa, Mija," she said warmly. "Welcome home." And for the first time in her life, Callie truly felt like she was home. Later that evening, after Noah had been fed, bathed, and put to bed in his crib without protest, apparently exhaustion had finally won out over separation anxiety. Harrison and Callie sat on the back patio, sharing takeout Chinese food and talking about everything and nothing. "I have a confession," Harrison said as they watched the sun set over Los Angeles. "I've been attracted to you for months. I kept telling myself it was just gratitude, but, Callie prompted with a smile. "But gratitude doesn't make your heart race when someone walks into a room. Gratitude doesn't make you look forward to bedtime stories just so you can hear someone's voice." Callie felt warmth spread through her chest. "I have a confession too. I've been in love with you since the night you sang to Noah when he had that fever in September. Do you remember?" Harrison's eyes widened. "You heard that. You were singing an old lullaby, and your voice cracked on the high notes, and Noah fell asleep instantly because he finally felt his daddy's love." Callie reached across the small table to take his hand. "That's when I knew you were going to be okay. Both of you." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the soft sound of Noah sleeping peacefully, no longer afraid that the people he loved would disappear. "Thank you," Harrison said finally. "For what? For sleeping on a cold floor? For fighting for him when I was too scared to fight for myself? For showing me that love doesn't have to end in loss?" He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "For making us a family." As if summoned by their words, they heard Noah stirring through the baby monitor. But instead of crying, he was making the soft, contented sounds that meant he was settling back into sleep on his own. "He's learning," Callie observed with satisfaction. "We all are," Harrison agreed, pulling her closer. "We're all learning." And in the nursery upstairs, Noah Blake slept peacefully in his crib, surrounded by the love of two people who had chosen each other, chosen him, and chosen to build something beautiful together. The next morning would bring new challenges, new adjustments, and the work of blending their lives into something sustainable and real. But tonight, they were simply a family who had found each other against all odds, who had learned that love was indeed more powerful than fear, and who had discovered that sometimes the most unlikely people become exactly the family you need. What did you think of Harrison and Callie's journey to love? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone had to choose between family expectations and following their heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories about unexpected families and the power of love to transform lives. In a house that had once echoed with loneliness and grief, 3 hearts now beat in harmony. Proof that families aren't just born, they're built with patience, courage, and the willingness to love without guarantees. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful love story of all. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.